Genesis 6 narrative states that the Nephilim are on the earth in those days and also afterwards. If that's true, can we find evidence that corroborates this? I'm L.A. Marzulli. Join me as we go on the trail of a Nephilim. There is a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world, and that's why I am on the trail of a Nephilim. I'm your intrepid host, L.A. Marzulli. Thanks for joining us here. I have a couple of stories I want to relate, which I think you'll find interesting, and we'll get into that. But first, a word from our trusted sponsor. In a world of economic uncertainty, safeguarding your retirement savings is more important than ever. Folks, gold is a trusted store of value, providing stability for centuries through countless market cycles. With a gold IRA from Noble Gold Investments, you can protect your financial future with the enduring power of precious metals. Don't let election volatility erode your hard-earned nest egg. Folks, vote for the timeless safety of gold and silver in 2024 and get up to 10 1-ounce silver Trump coins or a 10-ounce silver American flag bar with a qualifying account. Noble Gold Investments, your partner in financial peace of mind. NobleGoldInvestments.com, NobleGoldInvestments.com. Folks, remember, there's always a risk of investment, and there's no guarantee of any kind. However, my wife and I did this a few years ago, and we are absolutely tickled that we did. Once again, that's NobleGoldInvestments.com. This came from an article by Sarah Leahy, and she's a real smart gal and a great researcher, but she talks about Lake Lawn, and I'm just going to read it, and then I will kind of go from there. Basically, Delan Lake. There's a motel. It's still in existence today, and I've been there. I spent some time there at Lake Delan. And it says this: the most important mound group at Lake Delan is located within the property of Lake Lawn Resort. This is the largest mound group in Walworth County, with over 40 mounds still intact. The only comparable sites in southern Wisconsin are at a college in Lake Koshkonong. I hope I got that right, near Fort Atkinson. We are indebted to the resort owners who have gone to great lengths to preserve these important landmarks. Again, I've been to Lake Lawn. It's really well preserved. Many of the mounds are still there, but here's what I want to talk about. Most of the mounds at Lake Lawn Resort are circular or oval, suggesting an earlier period in mound building history. However, there are 2 bird effigies, sky spirits, and 3 turtle effigies, water spirits, some of which span over 100 feet. These effigy mounds suggest that later generations of mound builders came back to this important site. While Lake Lawn Resort has earned some fame for its mound collection, it has garnered even more attention for the supposed discovery of giant skeletons within these mounds. In March 1911, the Phillips brothers, who owned the resort at that time, dug into several of these mounds and allegedly discovered human skeletons ranging from 10 to 12 feet. Their skulls, according to local legend, were equally enormous. The Phillips brothers did not mention these unusual skeletons in their official reports of the Wisconsin Archaeological Society. Nevertheless, the rumored discovery made it all the way to the New York Times. Since then, researchers have offered as much as a $500 reward, yours truly, to anyone who can provide photographic evidence of the dig. No photographs have ever surfaced. Conspiracy theorists, of which, of course, I am definitely one, think they have been hidden away by the government, and others believe the entire story to be a hoax. I've been to Delan, Lake Delan. I also went to Madison and saw the original letters by the Phillips brothers, and I've talked about them before, and I will post them again. The bottom line is, in our opinion, in my opinion, I believe that the Phillips brothers were not seeking attention. In fact, the guy from the New York Times, they were aghast that someone was there. They tried to keep all this under the radar, and they were unable to. According to local legend, one of the Phillips brothers, who, by the way, hung himself, had one of the skeletons in the basement of his house. Now, that's hearsay. That's a great story. can't possibly vet it. We spent, and when I say we, it was myself and a couple of friends of ours that were there, Jeff Gregg for one. And what was interesting about this was we spent like 2 days, maybe 3 days in the archives. There were the museum boxes, and the town historian had passed away. And so all these boxes were just filled with articles, and we combed them looking for anything at all about Lake Delavan and specifically the Phillips brothers. We came up with nothing. What I did come up with was the back and forth between the Phillips brothers and the head archaeologist at Madison. And according to everything that I read and looked at and downloaded, some of that got burnt in the fire, unfortunately. There were some photographs I took, but the way it works is I went into the archives at Madison, and I spoke to the archivist there, and I wanted this, and that, and she bought me out the files, and I was able to go in the microfiche and look at it and say, I want to print this out, and they would print it out. And I don't have it anymore, but I used to have a letter from the Phillips brothers with a hand drawing showing the way the skeletons were laid in the grave. And they insisted that they were some hidden race, they didn't look human. They were in this enclosure. It was a mound, but it was an enclosure, which apparently was covered with some sort of clay. They were all sitting with their knees brought up to their chests, and they were not disarticulated bone piles. They were complete skeletons. So, once again, we have these reports, and it just makes us wonder, what's the truth? What are we looking at? And in my opinion, and I realize I'm totally stuck with it, but this is why we're on the trail. In my opinion, Native Americans did not build. They built some of the mounds. Chief Joseph Riverwind, who's a Tiana peace chief, came on the record in, I think, On the Trail of the Nephilim 1, 2, and 3, talking about that the idea that the Native Americans, First Nation people, built the mounds. They built the smaller ones, some of them, and they were used for burials. Some of the larger ones were then used, again, they would go into these very large mounds and create secondary burials. In other words, they didn't create, let's say, Cahokia, but in some instances, like Cahokia, they would use these mounds for their burials. So it's complex. We understand that. In my opinion, the reason for the pushback is simply this, that if there really are red-haired, six-fingered, giant skeletons, it goes back to the biblical prophetic narrative. It goes back and points to a supernatural worldview. In my opinion, much of mainstream archaeology does not adhere to that. They don't like that. They adhere to the Darwinian paradigm, and that is sacrosanct in both the academic community and, of course, the scientific community, and that's fine. People can believe what they want to believe. I am a frank supernaturalist. I remember going to an undisclosed location where there was a mound complex and speaking to the archaeologist there, and we went at it. We crossed swords in a friendly manner, but he believes what he's going to believe, and I'm going to believe what I believe. So I got back into the car, we were leaving, and Holy Spirit taps me on the shoulder. That's how supernatural is that, right? And even then, if you're a skeptic and you don't hold to a supernatural worldview, then you say, well, what do you mean the Holy Spirit taps you on the shoulder? What does that mean? Well, the Holy Spirit speaks to the born-again, Spirit-filled Christian. That's how it works. He will lead us. He guides us. He tells us to go, to stop, to look here, to look there. And this is why we uncover things, no pun intended. So I felt the Spirit of a living God tell me, go back in and ask him this specific question. So I did. I went back in and I said, excuse me, I got one more question. Have you ever seen anything or heard about anything at this complex that was supernatural? Instantly, he basically came forth with a story, and the story was this. I'm not going to tell you the name of the mound, but it's in the United States. He told me that there was a house on the compound, and he was staying in that house. But before the state came over and took over the site, a woman lived there, and as the legend goes, now again, this is hearsay. There's no way to vet this. She would see Black Panthers roaming around the mound. She would hear screams and cries. She would see light beings coming out of the mound. Now, I'm not making this up. Now, he told me this story. This gentleman told me that story. It's hearsay, but it's interesting. I'll give you one more. When I was down right near Lake Titicaca on the border of Peru and Bolivia, we went to Amura with our guide, Brian Forrester, and his lovely wife, Irene. And Brian wasn't in on this conversation, but Irene was interpreting for me, and I was talking to the docent there, and he has lived in this area all his life. And I said, well, have you ever heard any strange stories? And he looked at me and he said, yes. My parents used to see light beings coming out of the doorway at Amura. So, something's going on here. Light beings, what are they? When Mondo Gonzalez and I and our guide got locked in at Corral, which is the oldest site in the Americas. I'm kind of hopping all around here, but it's the oldest site in the Americas. And we were off in another area. They had locked the gate. We couldn't get out. So we had to go down the road and find the docent who lives there and sort of the caretaker, because they keep boots on the ground there because of vandalism and people coming in there at night. So this, oh, sorry. So we communicate, we're sorry. We didn't know the gate was locked. So he drives us to the gate. He unlocks the gate. Then I get that tap on the shoulder again. Why don't you see if you can interview this guy? So we did. We pulled out the cameras and we started interviewing him with our interpreter. And I said, have you ever seen anything strange going on here? And he kind of got nervous. It's in one of our films on the On the Trail of a Nephilim series. I forget which one. Probably number 3. The supernatural paradigm, but that's behind all these mounds. And he looks at me and he goes, yes, I have seen light beings coming out of the pyramids. Not making this stuff up. This guy has no Nephilim dog in the hunt. I'll tell you one more story before I get into this one. That there are, at the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio, Hbatman, when he was alive, took the 13 crystal skulls and went to the Serpent Mound, and they conducted a ritual on the Serpent Mound. Why does Hbatman come all the way from South America to go to Ohio to the Serpent Mound? Because it's serpent energy. Why does Hbatman go to Karnak, France, and when he gets to this one part of which is still intact, of some of the largest standing stones in Karnak. And Karnak, France has 80,000 standing stones, used to. The Catholic Church paid people to tear them down. And so our guide, Howard Crowhurst, took us to this area, and you can faintly see the serpent carved in the stone. Well, Hbatman had no idea where Howard was taking him. And all of a sudden he stopped and he goes, I feel serpent energy. He's in tune with it, which is why he goes to the Serpent Mound in Ohio. They conduct a ritual there. I show this in my presentations at my conferences, the conferences I go to. It's very unnerving because you've got all these people and they're all going like, and it's electric. It is absolutely electric. Are they opening up a gateway? One more story. When Fritz Zimmerman and I were at the Serpent Mound years ago at the spring equinox, there was a coven of witches at the Serpent Mound. They know what it is. And once again, we wrote here it is. I have it open on my desk, and I'll show you this right here. This is a really old book, and it's Harper's Magazine, and it's pretty cool. And this is the Serpent Mound, and you can see it right here. John Adam, you can zoom in on that, please. And so what we see, and I actually wrote a paper on this, in my opinion, this serpent effigy, why is it a serpent? Why is it there in Ohio? And in my opinion, this is the serpent in the act of swallowing an egg, destroying the egg. That's what it's trying to do. And who is the serpent? This goes back to Genesis 3:15. And once again, in my opinion, this is why it's so important to understand Genesis 3:15. Because Jesus, the pre-incarnate Jesus, is there in the garden with Adam and Eve and the serpent. And he looks at the serpent and he says, your seed, your offspring will be at enmity with the woman, with the seed of the woman. Your seed, your offspring, will be at war and enmity with the seed of the woman. He, the one coming from the woman, the Messiah, the proto-evangelion, the promise of salvation, will come from the woman. He will crush your head, your bruises heel. And now we go to Ohio, and here's the serpent mouth. And what's the serpent doing? It's that the mouth is open, trying to swallow that egg, trying to destroy that egg. In my opinion, it is Genesis 3:15 screaming at us. Why is it there in Ohio? And no one knows who built it. There's signage in Ohio that tells us that the Shawnee built it. But as Chief Joseph Riverwind points out, that Chief Wallace wrote years ago that no, the Shawnee did not build it. They were caretakers of it, but they did not build it. There are also reports of very tall skeletons being found in some of the mounds. Anyway, folks, on the trail of the Nephilim, there are, what is it, 8 now? Is 7 or 8? I forgot. I think it's 8. We have 8 films on the Trail of the Nephilim. Do your homework. Do your homework. You can buy the DVDs, or you can go to our streaming site, streaming.lamarzulli.net. I spent, 15 minutes with you here? I've scratched the surface. There are all these films, and that's why we created them, because there is a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world. lamarzulli.com or streaming.lamarzulli.net. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you soon. Hey folks, L.A. Marzulli here. I'm an author, lecturer, and filmmaker. We now have 14 books that are penned. The latest book is called Rungs of Disclosure. It'll be coming out in October. But here's the deal. In 2017, something happened on Tucker Carlson's show. Tucker was then on Fox News. He had this man, a former F-18 pilot. The man's name was Commander David Fravor. And he had an encounter, that's right, with one of these things, a tic-tac shaped UFO. He engaged in this thing, and when finally the craft left the scene, it left like a bullet being shot out of a gun. When Tucker Carlson asked Commander David Fravor, in your opinion, what was this? Commander David Fravor looks right at the camera and says this: it was something not from this earth. Folks, that's the first rung on the ladder of disclosure, on the disclosure ladder. It's happening. UFOs are real, burgeoning, and not going away. The books are not yet available. We'll have them probably in October, but the pre-sale, once it's up and running, it'll be an autographed copy. This may be the most important book I have ever penned.